This creepy story kind of reminds me of the premise of Heretic. So if you liked that movie, you should probably listen to this. I'm Meredith, this is Rattled and Shook, and I'm going to read you a bedtime story. This true creepy story was sent in by Amelia S. I was 19 and serving on a mission trip in North Carolina for my church at this time. In this program, they pair you with another person, which they refer to as your companion, and then they send you out to find people to teach about the church in hopes of baptizing them. At the time, I was sent to a very rural part of North Carolina. There was a man named Bob that we were teaching about the church for quite a long time. He lived in a trailer or like a manufactured home just off the street, pretty much in the middle of nowhere. I mean, there were houses like somewhat nearby, but it was a few miles before you would get to them. The surrounding landscape was just open fields and forest, and there was no streetlights, so it was pitch black if you went out at night. We had an appointment set up with Bob pretty late in the evening. Our curfew was at 9 p.m., so he was our last lesson of the day. We drove up to his house, and immediately we were struck by how dark it was. Even though the streets and the surrounding forest were always really dark, his home was usually lit up with Christmas lights, like year-round. It actually was Christmas time, so the weeks before, his house had been decked out even more so. But this time it was completely dark. No lights on inside or outside of the house. It carried a super eerie feeling. I've always been afraid of the dark, I still am, so the fear that I immediately felt was easy for me to explain away. Off to the left, I noticed a big metal barrel that had a small fire burning in it, but it looked like it was on the brink of going out, like it had been burning for a while. There was nobody in sight, no Bob, and none of the housemates that lived with him. It just felt wrong. At this time, my companion and I had pulled into the driveway and I turned the car off. Instant regret. I couldn't explain why, but I didn't like the idea of getting out of the car. But again, I'm afraid of the dark, so that's all it is, right? I looked over at my companion, and she looked just as uneasy. Neither of us could bring ourselves to exit the car. We decided it would be better to just give Bob a call to see if he would come out so we would feel more comfortable. We called him, I think, at least 3 times with no answer. If I remember correctly, the last call we made to him went straight to voicemail. My companion looked at me and said, "We need to get out of here now." I had no objections. I wanted out of there just as much as she did. I turned the key and we drove off, believing that the further away we got from his house, the better we would feel. Except we kept driving further and further away, and the horrible, dark feeling never left. We were driving down these dark, windy roads in the boonies of North Carolina. We were both sufficiently creeped out. However, my companion seemed especially uneasy. She kept reiterating that something had to be wrong. We got closer and closer to our apartment, but we continued to feel worse and worse. We just couldn't shake this horrible feeling. Right when we got to our street, I said to her, "I know this sounds weird, but do you think something followed us from Bob's house?" Immediately after I said those words out loud, the dark feeling in our car just intensified by 100-fold. As if acknowledging it had made everything worse. And it became so obvious that we were not alone. It was like whatever was with us heard me and decided to make itself known. I still struggle to describe the feeling, like dread, hopelessness, fear, any awful, ugly emotion you can think of, it was there. And I don't know how to make somebody else understand what it was like unless they've been in the presence of a truly evil entity before. It's just a tangible feeling. At this point, we were terrified of going home because we didn't want to bring it in with us. So we kept driving past our apartment. The only problem was our apartment was right at the edge of town, and the road we were on turned into the highway that took you to Charlotte. So here we are driving out of town, literally, on a highway that was poorly lit with some unknown darkness in our car. We were completely isolated. Around this time was when we decided to call the male missionaries, or the elders, that weren't super far from us. It was getting pretty late, and we didn't want to bother anybody in the congregation, but I think we called them no less than 20 times. We were in an area where we usually had service, but for whatever reason, each time we called, the call would just drop. There were only a couple of calls that went through, but all we could hear was static on the other end. Didn't matter how many times we called. We just couldn't get through to them. Finally, I found a place to turn around in this random dirt lot that had an old, abandoned, broken down shed nearby. Just our luck. And it added to the horrifying ambiance. But I saw an opportunity to head back into town, and I took it. We had settled on a plan to head to Walmart because the parking lot was well lit and public. We also had the idea to sing Christmas songs really loudly to help distract us and lighten the feeling. To be honest, it didn't really help, but it gave us something else to focus on. At this point, I felt the temperature in the car drop, and I just could not stop shivering. Every minute or so, I would shiver, like one of those full body shivers you get. I noticed that my companion kept looking at me a bit weird each time, but I didn't think much of it. We were just trying to keep it together at this point. I had no clue what our plan was once we got there. The longer I was in the car, the creepier the outside world looked. Like everything around me looked demented in some way. I really can't explain it, and I still don't understand it. I kept shivering, and then suddenly, my companion let out a sound. I said, "What?" "Nothing," she said quickly. She was quiet for a little while before she said, "I can tell you later." I could hear how upset she was by the tone of her voice. We finally pulled into the Walmart parking lot, and I was still at a loss for what to do. We hadn't been there more than 2 seconds before a car pulled up right next to us, and it was a member of our congregation and her daughter. We ran out of the car and we were crying, and she told us how they had followed us because they were surprised to see us out so late and figured something had to be wrong. The timing of them seeing us pulling in as they were pulling out is something I can't explain other than some kind of divine intervention. The daughter shared with us that she could sometimes see spirits and that she could see one in the back seat of our car. So we prayed, and then she said it was gone. They were kind enough to caravan with us back to our apartment. We were extremely rattled, to say the least. We felt relieved, but the fear and uncertainty lingered. I was determined to try to understand just more about what happened to us. Once we got home, I had to know what it was that my companion had seen or felt that made her react in such a visceral way. She told me that in the car, she had a feeling that said, "Don't look in the rearview mirror." But when someone says, "Hey, don't look over there," you're gonna look. So naturally, her eyes went straight to the rearview mirror, and for a split second, she made eye contact with whatever it was sitting in our back seat, and it smiled at her. She couldn't make out any other details, just the fact that she knew they locked eyes, and it was enjoying the terror it was inflicting on us. I mean, it smiled at her. I then mentioned the fact that I couldn't stop shivering the whole time, and she said, "It didn't look like you were shivering." I said, "What do you mean?" She said, "Your neck kept jerking out to the side. It didn't look like you were shivering. It looked like your body was contorting." This shocked me. I didn't perceive it that way. To me, I just kept getting full body chills, but I guess on the outside, it appeared more twisted. I can't even pretend to know what caused that. I don't know that I want to know. The idea to call Bob again surfaced. This time, he picked up right away and said something to the extent of, "Hey girls, I've been waiting for you to come by." We explained to him what happened and told him that for our own safety, we would not be able to return to his house. He immediately started crying. I felt so awful. I was afraid that we had hurt his feelings or that he thought we blamed him. But then he said, "I knew I shouldn't have burned those clowns." Clowns? We both looked at each other in complete confusion. What does he mean he shouldn't have burned those clowns? That's when we remembered. He used to tell us about this pair of clown marionette puppets that he owned. He always thought they were funny, but he would tell us how nobody else seemed to like them. I mean, they're puppets and clowns. I can't think of anything creepier than that. He joked that anytime somebody would come to his house, if they were staying too long, he would go pull one out and sit and wiggle its feet for his guest. Shortly after that, whoever was overstaying their welcome would leave fairly quickly. One night when we were over at his house, he asked if we wanted to see them. We were curious, so we said yes. He had them hanging in one of his back rooms from its strings. it really creeped us out, and we told him we agreed with everyone else. Apparently, he had taken what we said to heart, so he burned them in the metal barrel in the front yard. He seemed convinced that this is what released the entity that we encountered that night. I'm not sure what I believe. I do believe without a doubt that whatever latched itself onto us was pure evil, but I don't know what it was exactly. I don't know if I believe that the clown puppets were possessed and that burning them caused this. But Bob sure seemed to believe it. Looking back at that period, I can see so many situations that were incredibly unsafe for two 19-year-old girls just cut loose in the world. This particular experience being one of them. We were in the wrong place at the wrong time. I know everything about this story sounds extremely bizarre and crazy. I probably wouldn't have believed it if I hadn't experienced it myself. It just sounds so Hollywood horror. I had never felt and experienced anything like it before, and I haven't since. I wasn't even a believer in the paranormal before I served on this mission trip, but now I am. An interesting and not as relevant detail that my companion reminded me of recently. We had a lot of strange interactions with Bob at his house. He had an old shed off to one side of his property, and inside was a noose. The full story of it really is quite sad, and it's just not mine to tell. But I just remember it really freaked us out when he showed it to us. He definitely needed more than just missionaries. We weren't equipped to help him in the way that he truly needed, and I wish I wasn't so naive. We were only 19 and practically fresh out of high school. These situations were so far beyond us. He would also say that he could see spirits and that he'd seen some pretty horrific things. One night we were giving him a lesson on his front porch, and he just stared off into the field right behind us. We were both sitting facing him with our backs to this field, so we looked behind ourselves trying to see what he was seeing. We tried to get him to tell us, but he wouldn't. He told us that we just didn't want to know. It was starting to get dark, and so we got out of there pretty quickly. So Bob's house was the kind of place where this stuff, happened. It makes me wonder how much of it was actual spirits, or if some of it, or a lot of it, had to do with some mental health issues. Either way, I can see now, years later, that we should not have been out there by ourselves. But it was kind of what was expected of us, so, oh well, we did it. Of all the odd things that we saw there, the entity attaching itself to us definitely took the cake, for sure.